Okay, man. Cool.
Hello, everyone. I am Stephen Drew from the Architecture Social. It's the evening for me, but it's actually the morning for my fantastic guest here. We're doing a video for the first time as well. And so I'm not used to this, Gavin, but Gavin Crump, all the way from Australia, who is the Aussie BIM Guru. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, just had Australia Day yesterday, which is one of the laziest days of the year. So just getting back into work mode. So yeah, no, doing great. And it's a relatively nice day outside. It may be a bit gloomy for Australia. It's a bit,
Oh, look at
overcast.
that.
Not quite what you'd expect,
I,
but
it's just
yeah.
it's just dark here. I haven't got much to show you,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, but I'm in my new recording studio set up too. I just moved apartments about a week ago, so this is the first time I've got to video anywhere with my new setup. So can't wait to use it more during the year. But yeah, doing really well. I'm really excited to be here.
I love it. I love it. So how we met actually was on LinkedIn on the live stream. So you were a guest during the last podcast, and
Mm.
so anyone that knows you, so you've got a background in BIM, but more importantly, we actually started talking randomly about World of Warcraft during the live stream, isn't it? So you're a
We did.
BIMer, you're a
Yeah,
video game person, but you're
yeah,
a
a bit
bit
of a nerd.
far. Other than that, I think we would be best mates otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the people I meet in architecture, BIM, I start talking to them and I'm like, oh, we're just the same nerd, essentially. There's so many people that, because I mean, programming computers, there's so many overlaps with, nerd geek culture that I just come across so many kindred souls that I'm like, if I'd met you during high school, we would have been like, like best of chums. So yeah, it's always cool to meet people with similar interests and things that aren't necessarily just architecture too. Things where you're like, hey, this is actually more fun to talk about because we talk about architecture every day. So it's a nice sort of tangent sometimes to go off.
Well, you need yeah. It's nice to have a bit of a breather. And one of the things
Yeah.
on like the architecture social that we're actually setting up at the moment is a bit of a gaming clan. So maybe
Oh,
what we can do is if we can get enough people, we'll get 40 people in World of Warcraft. When we'll raid Molten Core, vanilla. Let's go to the
I might have to
classics.
reactivate my account. I haven't played it for a little while. I stopped about a year ago, just because I was getting too into it, and everyone was on different time zones to me, so it wasn't the best for my sleeping pattern. But I
I
might be able to get back to it.
Well, I stopped a while ago as well, but I tell you what, it would be fun on the Architecture Social to do that. But another reason why we were talking is because a lot of the early podcasts that I did as well, because when I was on furlough, a lot of furlough in the UK is basically like being put on the backbench with
Yeah,
work, and
yeah,
I felt like it was a good time at that point to do some content, A, to keep my brain going, but to talk
mm,
about students who might feel a bit lost during this time. And
yeah.
one of the conversations that we had together, which I think is really interesting, is the fact that you now have gone down this avenue where you specialize in BIM. But so when you were studying, did you study
Mm.
a traditional course of architecture?
Yeah, I did. I did 5 years straight through, 3 years bachelor's, 2 years master's. I think I got shown Revit once during the course. It was BIM still wasn't really a big thing when I was studying, so there was almost a frowned upon aspect to BIM in the university courses because the idea was if you used BIM, it was too rigid and constrained your designs, it
Mm.
constrained your thinking, and it sort of did until you learned to bend the spoon of BIM and actually learn more complex modeling techniques in a more rigid program to bend the spoon. So I didn't really even think about BIM until I worked on my first project, which was a $2 billion hospital,
Whoa.
pretty much entirely being delivered in Revit. So it was massive. There was like hundreds of models and I think 80 architects in one office. So that was obviously a bit of a storm in a teacup to be in, but it was a pretty amazing experience. And I got sat next to the BIM manager of that job, that poor guy having 300 models on his shoulders every day.
We're a
But he
million
taught me
questions
about
from you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Literally my first day on the job, like everyone thinks I'm some BIM guru, but my first day on the job, I didn't know how to use Revit. I botched my way through the Revit test. They just let me in because they felt bad for me and they needed people. I was really lucky to get that job. And I overwrote a file that 6 people were in because I didn't understand how you save in a work sharing
Oh
environment.
no.
And so I made six
Oh
friends on my
no.
first day. And after that, he said, all right, I'm going to take you back a step and show you how to clean models and audit. And he sort of put that OCD aspect in my brain about BIM and cleanliness and well maintained standards. And it just sort of went from there. So it was a really strange derail almost of what I was expecting to do. I thought I was going to come in and do documentation design, and it just completely derailed me. But like I could see the rabbit hole straight away. It was right there. It was really weird. So I was really lucky that I had that guy to really just reposition my thinking, and it just went from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember basically when I was doing my part one, it was MicroStation because the UK is a bit behind Australia, and I had the same thing where actually on my CV I said MicroStation Basic, okay, and I put AutoCAD Advanced because that's all I'd done. Vectorworks Advanced and MicroStation Basic. And now I advise people not to put the word basic in. It'd be literal how long they use software. But you're right. I put basic because I've opened it once or twice, and then I got the job, and then it was the same thing. I got there, I was like, so how do I trim like a desk, you know? And the guy knew straight away. He was just like, oh God, here we bloody go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
what do you know about MicroStation? I know of MicroStation.
yeah. I was like, so this is the MicroStation. They're like, oh, he's calling it the MicroStation. Do you know what I mean? So
whenever I hear the Revit, I know that feeling when you get a new hire and they say the Revit, and you're like, all right, here we go. Let's start from scratch. Although they're my favorite people to work with actually, when they're like a block of clay. And you don't have any premonition about what the program should do. So sometimes they can actually be super valuable as long as they've got the perseverance and the mettle to get through it. Yeah,
I think that's a fair sentiment. But look, just so you know, I know you get a lot of interviewers, but I am fully equipped to do this interview because I have a certificate in my room. I forgot to bring it in because I messed up the time zones. Because I'm now international. Normally it's UK interviews, but the certificate is. I went on a CAD assist course, there was a company in the UK, and I was a certified Revit beginner. So I'm just saying.
Oh, there you go. Well, that's a start. Yeah.
In 2014, though, and I haven't loaded it up, and I haven't practiced architecture.
Revit hasn't really changed too much since 2014, so that's probably good news.
Well, I'll take your word for it. But jumping back to, I think it was an important nugget that you mentioned there of when you joined the office, and I appreciate now. I was like yourself, the person asking a million questions on MicroStation, but I look back and I think it's a really important thing that most architects within a practice, they will want to help. They will want to help the next generation of architects. We almost feel sorry for the person. It's like, oh, I've been in your position. And sharing data is so important. But let's talk about, because you outlined a few really cool points and talking about career pathways. So you established them. You joined the practice, you crashed the BIM model, you overwrote the file, which, that doesn't sound good to me. Right, that's that. But it's by the way, I will tell you what would make you feel better. I once forgot a complete floor of there's this big tower called the Ram Brewery that's been built. Yeah, I feel like I forgot in the area schedule one whole complete floor. Or I think when I was doing a 3D model, I issued one floor. So someone on the design team, which was issued the next day, was like, it looks shorter. And I just deleted a floor. So don't worry, I've been there. But then we do have another thing in common, apart from being BIM experts, is that while we studied architecture, we don't do traditional routes in architecture anymore. And now I recruit. You set up your own BIM consultancy, and I'm sure you've done a more traditional BIM role. But I've seen so many people in recruitment now that I've helped become BIM coordinators and BIM managers who didn't even know that they were doing BIM coordination in an architectural practice.
They didn't even realize they had sometimes.
Yeah. What was your experience with that then, and that kind of critical point? So you must have learned and done quite well since overwriting the model.
Yeah. There's a few improvements since then, luckily. So I didn't just keep overwriting models and then make a YouTube channel about it. But essentially, I started in like what they call like a technician role. So sort of doing a bit of documentation, a bit of modeling, but learning about the framework of what BIM models really are and how they all come together, and going to meetings, talking to people in higher roles, and absorbing. Essentially, I was just in sponge mode for my first 2 or 3 years, just like ears open everywhere I went, going online, doing heaps of research in my downtime. I did a lot of practice from home, which was pretty necessary just to get ahead of where everyone currently was, because like there's more and more to learn every day. There's more programs, more workflows, so you sort of just have to catch up even harder every time you join. Like I do feel for the graduates these days, there's a lot to learn very quickly, and the companies don't always teach it. They sort of expect that you just magically find it somehow and then bring it back to work tomorrow. But yeah, so I went from there, and then I went straight into a BIM manager role. So I sort of leapfrogged the coordinator role. I had an opportunity come up to go to Sydney in Australia. So I'm originally from a place called Adelaide, which is like south central. Grew up there as a kid and worked there until pretty much after I finished that major hospital job, and then did a bit of work in defence. So I can't talk about that, or a little red dot will start appearing on my head. But I moved into a BIM management role. I essentially went out for a drink with the current BIM manager who came down from Sydney, and we essentially just found an opportunity, and off I went after I sobered up. And then I sort of probably did BIM management like a little bit too early. Like a lot of people I talk to, I teach them like, learn to walk before you run. And I sort of, was jogging at least maybe, but I started running pretty fast and probably needed to take a step back. And I became a BIM coordinator in a few different companies, and that taught me more about collaborating with other people and coordinating engineering disciplines and learning more about the way other people actually work and the way that their design requirements overlap with ours, and how to resolve when one person wants to drop the ceiling but the other person needs to put more ducts in the ceiling, and how you can make those scenarios work, and learn all of the sort of the tricks of the trade, and how thin you can force an engineer to make their duct that they're not telling you, those sort of little industry secrets that are dangerous to know if you're on the architect side. But sort of went from there back to BIM management. So there was a bit of a leapfrog as I figured out exactly what sort of skills I needed. So I sort of took a step back and a step forward and a step back, and then eventually ended up back in BIM management with the full armament of arms to take on the challenges that I didn't have the first time around. So it was a bit of an all over the place journey. So I always try to teach people that you shouldn't be afraid of change, or just realizing when you're missing a certain part of your skill set that you need to find somewhere. So it's all about just building up that confidence in what you do overall, and finding what you do overall as well. So are you a BIM coordinator, or are you a designer? Is there like a middle ground between those roles? There's a lot of grey roles and grey definitions I find these days. Like some people, you ask them what they do and they sort of have to think for a second before they decide to put it in a few words, because it's so hard to describe. Like I just say consultant these days, because most people I meet don't even know what BIM is outside of architecture, or they know what BIM is and they don't like it. So I try to just reframe it depending on who I'm talking to. Yeah.
I think it's do you know what? It's strange you use the word consultant, because in terms of recruitment consultant, that's got a stigma, isn't it? So
yeah, it depends on the nature of the recruitment agency that they work for. I think if people work like on their own or in smaller firms, I think people like it more, because they know that they tend to be more hands-on or more dedicated to the employees. It's more like the churning recruitment agencies can be harder when they're like, they've got 300 recruiters all working together, and thousands of people churning through the system. But I find like the best recruiters I've worked with have tended to be like in the smaller scale companies, or even just like sole trading, doing their own thing. I find that they have like a lot more to give, because they're more personally invested in people's career development. Like I had one that helped me through one of my roles, and they still call me to this day, like every few months, just to see what I'm up to, because they were so happy just to see how they helped me sort of step on that journey. So, but there is stigma for sure, yeah. Like, because I know a lot of recruiters can be quite persistent, and sometimes they'll get you somewhere for 6 months and then try to flip you 6 months later so they can get their little recruiting bonus. And there's all sorts of funny little tactics they use, but I think most recruiters I work with these days seem quite genuine. And I see a lot of them too, because I get at least every week in my LinkedIn message inbox, I get at least 10 people asking for like career advice or how to find a job. And if they're in Sydney, I usually flip them to a recruiter that suits them. Just because I can only really give them advice. They usually start by saying, "Can I work for you?" And I'm like, I go and look at my bank balance, and I'm like, no, I think I'd rather keep that for myself. but I flip them to somewhere that can connect them with the right place. And because I guess part of what I've done is sort of turn myself into an industry mentor of sorts. So that does happen quite a lot. But there's good recruiters out there for sure. Yeah.
Well, hopefully I can be in the good camp. But
I think based on what you're doing with Architecture Social, you're definitely one of the good ones.
Do you reckon? All right, cool. But there's a few you covered a lot of points that were really interesting. And the one thing that I do sympathize for is because when you were, like BIM managers, BIM consultants, I do think there's a period where it was almost like the rock stars of recruitment world. So you'd always have loads of recruiters be like, "Hey, you're a BIM person. Can you please look at my job and all this stuff? And you were like unattainable gurus that had like loads of recruiters in your inbox. But it's changed quite a lot, and I think it's changed in a few ways. One of the bits that was really interesting you talked about them is now compared to 2014. Okay, in terms of recruitment, finding a BIM manager for a role, there wasn't many, right? There was almost like this unofficial analogy that we used in recruitment of you almost had to ship a BIM manager in from Australia. Seriously, it was like basically someone that was really good and BIM in Australia, they'd come to the UK and then they'd be like BIM manager for, I don't know, Foster's, Shepherd Robson.
Yeah, I knew a few that did the jump. It was quite common. I mean, I used to use the analogy that it was a little bit like the dating game, like all the good ones were taken.
Yeah.
So you had to pay to put it. Yeah.
And there wasn't many. And what's really interesting now is that it was almost like I feel like BIM came from a place of, like you talked about, it was experience in industry. Whereas now, if someone's interested in the idea of BIM, that they studied architecture, you could almost do a course in it. And you mentioned it here in a few of the notes we talked about is, should graduates like officially, because in the UK you can study an MSc like degree in BIM per se. Now, I guess that's one way of doing it, but you probably have a bit of an insight into that. And you talked about mentoring.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, what would you kind of advise someone that may be interested in BIM or is studying architecture, or what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I have pretty strong opinions on the study of BIM. Like, I've got a video I've done on YouTube that's super in depth if anyone wants to check it out on my channel, but I'll link it to you after. But I more or less usually find that I have met people that have just done the pure BIM study pathway. And I mean, first of all, I find they struggle to get a job because there's no company out there that's just BIM. Like, that's not what the company's base offering is. Like, BIM is it's one of the layers of the cake. So you need to know more about the overall cake and what generates the company's money or their income stream, which is sometimes BIM is a component of what they deliver, but it's actually like, if you're an architect, it's architecture, it's design, it's those things that BIM doesn't really teach you, but you can sort of start with, say, like architecture and design, and then find your way into BIM with the context of architecture as the foundation. And that's usually what I recommend people do. So usually I say it's best to do like your traditional study pathway, unless you absolutely can't stand any of that pathway. Like, don't force yourself through something that you're just not going to enjoy, because chances are you won't even finish it and you might never come back to the industry, and that's obviously not a good thing. But I'd say, like, if you can do a more traditional pathway, I'd say it's better. If you're going to be an engineer, then study engineering. Sometimes those courses, they have like a bit of a double degree overlap that you can do these days, where they introduce BIM as a pretty major component, like almost doing a thesis, but now you do like a model or something like that instead on the side. That gives you that context between your studies. And then from there, I usually try to get like a fairly traditional job, because you'll learn the base experience of being an architect or an engineer. And maybe you're not going to be an engineer by the end, you want to be a BIM manager, but every day you're going to be dealing with engineers, you're going to be supporting engineering requirements. So you really do have to have been in those trenches to relate to the people that you're supporting. Whereas if you're just that BIM guy, you may as well be like an IT manager. And how many people, relate to the IT manager on an architectural level? Like, obviously not many people. They're talking the other definition of architecture to us, the one that you look up when you look in the dictionary and it says IT system architecture, and it's like, no, not that one. That's not the job I was looking for.
Oh, I get that all the time with the social, where people are like, I thought it was software architecture. But what's interesting about what you're talking about is it kind of is the same thing for me, as a recruitment consultant. You get so many recruitment consultants that do not have an understanding of architecture and then become an architectural recruitment specialist. And it's like, hang on, you were never in the office. How do you know? And I mean, you can get some good ones, but I do agree that actually having studied architecture and working in architecture, it means that you've been there, therefore you can relate to someone. And I think that, I imagine there is a transferable quality to that with BIM, as in, because you've worked on a project, you see it from maybe say now in terms of a task, you will see BIM from an operational standpoint, or you see it from a strategic standpoint, but then you'll also understand from you being that guy who crashed that BIM model 6 times, that you've got to train someone up the right way, or you've got to do all these factors, and you can sympathize from their position. And I think that is really, really useful. And
really
I kind of
important.
yeah, but if you didn't go in industry, that's the bit you miss, though, isn't it? Because you've never been doing the late nighters, you never know the frustrations. So do you know what I
You can't
mean?
empathize with the people that you're supporting. I mean, a big part too is almost you sort of play devil's advocate to yourself sometimes. When someone comes up and says, "Oh, something's not working," and they won't tell you exactly why because they've done something wrong and they don't want to say what they've done. If you've been there and done it, you know what's happened, and you can just break that barrier straight away and say, "Okay, real talk. Let's just solve it. I know why this has happened. It's okay. I missed out a whole level in the building. How can we fix this?" And a pure BIM manager might just say, "Well, that's just silly because I'm a programmer and I think about the world in ones and zeros." Like, so it's you need that human relation as well, where that they can see that you've done this sort of stuff before too. Like you've started in a similar place to them, and I think that empathy is a really important quality that sometimes without that experience you just don't have. You can pretend that you understand what they're doing just to get them to leave your desk, but that's not that's obviously not the right the right attitude we need in AEC. So.
I think you're touching upon a really interesting thing, and it actually is one of the points we got here. But it's so true. Is while you've got the skills of BIM, and we're talking about working in industry, people skills and that kind of compassion. Yeah, it is so important. I've got a bit of a story to talk about with that, and I think you'll enjoy it. And it's one of my friends actually. But we're going to be all hypothetical. And so when I was working in industry with a really fantastic CAD manager, BIM manager. But sometimes people would be scared to go and show him problems in the project, because what would happen is, say now I'm issuing the deadline, right? And I need to speak to you, Gavin, about something, but I'm like, oh shit, because if I speak to Gavin, he's going to flag up all the problems in my project.
I've been that guy before.
Yeah. So, and I don't need that right now because I've got to issue something to the client. So I might have set the file up wrong, but I've got to get the drawings out. And that would be I remember once on a deadline, it was like, oh, I need to find out this microstation thing. And they were like, do not go to him. Do not do that now.
Point out the layer naming standard when you're just trying to smash a drawing out.
Yeah, because I remember being that guy, just like with not doing the naming standards and everything. And even in recruitment now, everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and it's important to acknowledge them. My weaknesses, sometimes you see online like them productivity people or the people that do lists of lists. I'm the opposite. I don't do lists.
I used to, and I just dropped it. It was too OCD. I was spending more time managing lists than doing things. It almost became,
Well, it's a good habit to have in one way. It'll occasionally, though, bite me in the ass when I've done something wrong. Or I used to be the guy when we were doing renders that would have like final version 1112.
Copy 2,
Which is not good. Which is too far, but. I guess with all of this, I do think it helps to be a little bit organized, and it helps.
Yeah. I think it's good to just pick a system and stick to it. That's one thing that some BIM managers are really bad at doing. They'll reinvent the wheel constantly, and you never have like the latest and greatest system in your project because they're already 3 versions ahead of you the moment you blink, essentially. Like, for example, my own business, I think day one, I decided on all the naming conventions for my documents, for my client numbering system, and it was the really boring stuff, but I said, let's just get it now, stick to it, haven't looked back, still use it. And I learned that through BIM management, that if you constantly rename standards and line weights, you end up with 20 different versions of everything, and you haven't even got a standard at that point. But you're right, there is you need that base standard that carries it through, but it's more about consistency and finding something that works for whoever's using it, I guess,
Yeah, well, I think it kind of comes to the analogy we're talking of. The more industry experience I have, bizarrely, the more it would seem unorganized. But I think over time, the more you learn things, I like what you said there, if you realize what's important and what's not. And so your experience has gone, I need some kind of naming convention, but you don't need to do the new naming convention of all naming conventions when that one works. And I think that's and then the other analogy that you've, and we can test the theory I've got, is that, so when I've set up a recruitment business, half of, like, as you know, you're setting up a business, or I almost used to think of myself as a bit like a BIM person. I was like, I'm all about efficiency and procedures, right? And what I tend to find is when people are setting up things, these procedures, they'll overcomplicate the process. Whereas I always felt like a good BIM manager or someone designing systems, actually, you should always think of the person that's using it, and you should reduce the process. It's about making things efficient, taking stuff out.
Human readable, human usable. Yeah, I mean, I look at my old systems and my new systems, and I used to build like a system that only myself and a computer with an algorithm built into it could understand. It was like everything was a code and a letter, and it's like, oh, what does the F stand for here? Oh, it stands for furniture. What does it stand for over there? Oh, fire. It's like, oh, I can't understand it. So little idiosyncrasies that I sort of had to iron out of the way I work, and now I've just tried to break it right down. Like, you know, my coding system is like 4 digits, and that's it. Like, it's one system. Stick to it. And document the heck out of it too. If it's going to be complicated, like, it needs to be documented and accessible and trainable too. I guess if you can't train something in like 5 minutes, it's probably not a good system, I guess, or at least the base principle. Yeah.
Well, what I find fascinating about and what I respect about BIM consultants and BIM managers is that it's less about. So I realize the importance of BIM. I'm not going to be the guy on Twitter sort of saying this and that because I don't know enough about it. But what I think is interesting is every BIM person I've met who's really good, it's all about their pursuit of making things more efficient, solving complicated problems. So I mentioned briefly before, one of the people I respect is Thomas Mahone in the industry, who set up Bimorph. I mean, he's just like ruthlessly persistent on what's the word I'm going for? You know, like he makes Bimorph modules and solves.
Oh yeah, he's very. If he's from what I've seen, when he starts something, he sees it through and he makes it work. And he makes it accessible too. Like, he actually shares a lot of his code source and stuff like that too. So he's really good at not just, you know, internalizing a proprietary system. It might be complicated, but it's still accessible and understandable. I mean, I use his Dynamo package all the time, and some of his nodes are some of the cleanest implementations I've seen in custom nodes. So yeah, I really respect him. But he's a good advocate for what he does too. He sort of shares a lot of his ideas on the forums, and yeah, he's good like that.
Well, that's an important point as well. So I guess what I was saying is that I really admire the way he tenaciously goes after a goal. And I think a lot of BIMers, I respect the passion that goes into it. So you've been in industry, and then over the years you see, like, I think that I can add value here. I think that this can be done better, and therefore you've set up, you know, the BIM Guru stuff. You got Tom at Bimorph, and I think that's great. But that's the really interesting bit, is that you were in industry, then you found your passion, and then you pursued it. And I think that ties in a little bit. And what I try to say to graduates is, you should probably do a year or two in industry, find out what you like, find out what parts of it, and then you can build from that. Because I think that, because you mentioned briefly you'd like to do more mentorship, and I think that's amazing that you're going to do that this year. And I watched your YouTube because I'm subscribed, and I watched your presentation where you said you're going to do it, and I think it's amazing you're going to do that. But the trick is with the person, and is that just to learn BIM for the sake of it, there's only so much you can do with that. But I guess what I'm saying is, people have to be really passionate about it. They have to want to solve all these problems, and they've got to be invested. But the other bit I like that you talked about there, which resonates with me in recruitment, is sharing. Okay, because recruitment consultants, they don't share, right?
Oh, I mean, a lot of firms in AEC don't either. There's a lot of silos still being held up pretty strongly. I mean, a big part of my YouTube is trying to break a couple of silos on things that just don't need to be proprietary, like, you know, just basic workflows that I know every office has their version of. Well, here's one, and it's out in the open now. And, you know, I see firms sort of replacing their old version with what I've shared, and I'm like, hey, cool, like, it's out there now. And sometimes on LinkedIn, I see, like, people posting up screenshots of Python code they're doing, and I see the variable names, and I'm like, that's my variable names, cool, like, it's out there. I've released it in the wild, and now it's everyone's. So I think it's changing slowly. Like, we've got, like, open source as an idea now emerging, where people are trying to develop platforms off, say, like the back of Blender, for example, to have an accessible and sometimes free, not always free in terms of cost, but free in terms of access and being able to reach into the base code of the program. So there's definitely, like, some resistance emerging at the moment. You saw the open letter from, you know, Autodesk and Revit and some of those things that, you know, signs of, you know, cracks in the silo emerging. But yeah, I imagine even in recruitment, you've got, like, all your systems and your standards and your techniques that you use. So just to stay competitive, that's the challenge, Yeah,
It's
it just comes down to finding what makes the companies competitive, because that's the thing that obviously should be proprietary to some degree. Because if everyone has it, then what's everyone competing based on? But and you still need enterprise and business to be successful, and competition's good too because it gives the client choice. But it's more finding what matters. Like, is the line weight table in an architecture firm what makes them competitive? Hopefully not. They might think it is, but I'm happy to tell most of them it's not. So maybe that should just be out in the open and industry standard. But if you develop your own platform, sure, maybe you keep that internal to some degree, but maybe you can share it out somehow by licensing it, or yeah.
Well, I think that you're onto something. What I would say is, at first, the idea of even like doing a live stream, or even with me, it was the idea of there's two things. I think you almost feel like if you're giving something away, like it's foolish. You're like, are you crazy? Why would you share this information? Why would you give someone a script? But I think it's the opposite. Actually, people in industry and life, they recognize that you're the one that gave it away.
Yeah, it comes back to you in so many ways. I mean, just even people knowing who you are, that's a great feeling for me, knowing that I'm there in the industry and I have like my place in it now. I go back like 3 or 4 years ago and no one knew who I was. I was an unknown, just toiling away at a BIM manager's desk and, never actually impacting the industry in a bigger way than supporting a project, essentially. So that's even just a reward unto itself. But it does open up a lot of opportunities, obviously like things like podcasts that I wouldn't be on otherwise. But a lot of even my clients, a lot of them came to me through just knowing what I did on YouTube or seeing a tutorial and wanting to, have the next model upgrade of what I showed them as a little mini teaser. So there's so many ways it comes back to you as well. People think that if you give away something, you've essentially lost the opportunity to make some money out of it. But there's probably bigger rewards at the end, even from a financial aspect as well. So like my anchor client last year, who probably pulled in half my income, they essentially just found me off YouTube and said, hey,
Really?
I want you to do that, but I want to do like the Rolls Royce of what you've shown. Like, you've shown me like the little Mini Cooper, I want the Rolls Royce. And we just went all out, and it was a massive undertaking for one person. But I mean, I wouldn't have had that without putting some of that knowledge out there to give people confidence in what I can do as well. So yeah, there's always opportunities. Even you might not even realize them at first, and suddenly like 1 year later, someone discovers your channel and off it goes. Because I think I did 3 or 4 months on about 100 subs, and I just pushed through, just kept going, and eventually it started paying off. So yeah, there's a lot of reward to it, and sometimes closing things off is worse because you're only helping like 5 or 6 people maybe, and that's not really that rewarding. Chances are they'll just steal it and go somewhere else and give it to someone else anyway. So
Yeah.
if you close things off, you run the risk that it's going to get open, and you're not going to be the person that's really credited for it anyway. So yeah.
I remember when I left the EPR Architects that I downloaded the BIM execution plan, and I logged it there. And I remember someone being saying to me, like, have you taken that? And I remember they were a really good company, and they just had to ask me. And I was just like, honestly, do you think I'm putting like your BIM execution plan on, Craigslist? Come on.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? I was just like,
reference, yeah.
yeah, but I think there's a few interesting points in what you're talking about there, because if we imagine you're on your journey, you're working out what you want in life, I think that there's an element of community, and especially now during this pandemic and everything else, where I think being online and sharing is so important. So, for instance, I mean, I'm not interested in, and take this in the nicest way. I watch your videos and they're engaging, and I find it. I respect what you do, but I'm not the person watching the videos. And yet we met online because we had mutual interest in
we had common
mentorship.
motivations in what we were doing.
And I think that comes from being open to opportunity. Oh, that sounds like a bit like a LinkedIn term, but you know what I mean. When you're up for it, things come back.
Open to opportunity, not open to work, open to collaborate, I guess would be the one. Yeah, maybe that's a better. Then open to collaborate.
There you go. But I think it's just that willingness to discuss, and a really good example as well is, I think we both know, like Pierre Venter, right? I had him on the podcast. I've known him for years, and he can talk about some stuff in BIM that I won't understand, but I thoroughly enjoy.
He's a deep thinker. He goes very deep. Yeah, he goes beyond even the level that I'll think about it. He's given me some amazing ideas just over the past year or two, just about where even I should focus my attention. And
He's a big fan of you, I may tell you.
Oh yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
met about probably two years ago, I think, through LinkedIn, and he just started chatting, and suddenly I was getting these huge messages, and I'm like, wow, this guy cares. Like, so it was good to meet someone that's that passionate about it. Yeah, and we
well,
had the
he's been
occasional WhatsApp chat. Yeah,
yeah, well, he's been really helpful with the social, and what's been interesting is that, especially when we first spoke to Pierre, I said, "Look, I'm setting up the architecture social," and you don't mince words a bit. He's like, "Okay, that's interesting. I think there's another BIM one," and and I was like, "Oh no, but just come on for the fun of it." And then what's been really great is that me and him have had a few stimulating chats about kind of really engaging with things. And I tell you, in specific with the BIM community as well, I've seen one or two like BIM webinars,
yeah,
and I think there's a part of the culture right now where I think actually just going to a BIM seminar, if you're not prepared to like participate, or if
yeah.
you're not prepared to
You're not going to
learn,
get
I
value.
mean,
Yeah.
it's worth nothing. I mean, a piece of paper saying that I was in the webinar doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything, but
I was
it's
trying to tell people in general, just like don't focus on the piece of papers anyway. Just to focus on the value that you're deriving from what you're doing. Like even when I make my own course platform, there'll be certificates, but I'm not going to be like, hey, this is what matters. Like it's just going to be tacked on the end, like, oh, I did it, cool. Like it's more like the value that you get along the way is really what matters. And like you said, that engagement, that's really the only way you can derive your own personal value out of the experience, I guess, too.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes those BIM sessions can be a bit like jargon. So it's more like finding the right ones that suit your skill level as well. I know a lot of people just go to them because it's BIM, but it's sort of reading, who's doing it, what are they talking about, and really thinking about, what level you want to learn at as well. Like for example, there's a guy called the Revit Kid or Jeffrey in America, and he's doing some really good live streams, and he has really accessible content that's broken right down for the beginners. And I find sometimes people, they'll go to some super officiated, super BIM talk instead, and it's like just because it's maybe on YouTube and it's not the format that they think is going to be the one that gives them a good piece of paper or something like that. But really, the value they can get out of something like that is much more meaningful. And that's what I like about your platform too, in that it's very accessible for students that aren't necessarily looking for the bee's knees. I don't want to just go from zero to BIM manager in one day. It's more about collaborating with people at similar levels to them and actually building each other up as a community. So I think it's really great what you're
Oh,
doing. Yeah, yeah,
no, thank you.
looking really promising, and I'm seeing like some really good activity on there as well, which is a good sign. So,
No,
yeah,
I appreciate it. I mean, the only reason I was giggling there a little bit when you're talking is because every time um, you get involved, I almost want to not talk about BIM. When you come to live stream, and now I just like want to talk about World of Warcraft. That's why I was giggling.
we
Um,
should do a separate one, just talking about WoW, and we can get our characters out and go walking around going,
yeah, yeah, but that would be so cool. Well,
yeah.
I think that
Or we
I
can do both
think.
at the same time. Like I don't know if you know that weird YouTube format people use these days, where it's just them playing a game but talking about something completely different while they're playing the game, and that's
Oh
just
my
what the
gosh,
video is.
I
So we're
think
talking
that's
about Tim, but we're just walking around like, wow.
I think that's like a brilliant idea. Either
Yeah.
you can do BIM on there, we can talk about the future of architecture. But I tell you
Yeah,
what, a
yeah.
mini side topic for a second is that
Mm.
I was totally fascinated with Vive and actually, do you know what I wrote my dissertation on in architecture?
Mm.
Bear in mind this was 2012, so
Oh
at the
no,
time
no problem.
I was proud. I wrote about interactive gaming. Basically, at the time, Twin Motion and Lumion were in
Yeah, yeah.
beta
I mean, it's quite
alpha.
early for that time. I mean, that was really just cutting edge at that time, really just
Yeah,
emerging. So you'll bang on the money with that one.
I'll send you it. Right,
Yeah, that'd be cool.
you can use what it's going to be outdated, but
Mm.
at the time I remember doing it, but I didn't get a good grade because what I did is that I went off and I lost the meaning of it, and what I did was I just thought they were so cool, and the dissertation was just like, oh, you got Lumion, you got this and that, and the guy was like,
You were geeking out, and they couldn't relate to the
there
geek
was
out.
no
Yeah.
point, there was no like meaning, I was just like, at the
But
end I was
if you
like,
have the
yeah,
right lecturer or the right tutor, like I know one guy at my uni that would have just given you a HD for just even using like a headset or something. He was so on that at the time. So I
really,
found uni's a bit like that too. You almost have to get like that tutor that's in sync with you to really get like a resonant grade. Like so, I find sometimes I encourage students not to worry about the grades too much. Like obviously figure out your GPA that you want to meet, but at the same time, picture more about the value you want to get out of each unit that you do. So for a design studio, don't just do the building. Your tutor wants you to do the building you want to do. Like it's finding those opportunities. Because I think when I was at uni, the people that got the big grades were the ones that basically just sucked up to the tutors, and hopefully it's not quite that not quite that typical these days. But I'm sure people still try to just figure out the criteria to get the grade that they need rather than what they should really learn from the unit.
It's I went to two universities and they were totally different. I went to the University of Westminster, which was more London centric, and there definitely was, and it could have changed since then. Bear in mind it's 2006. University of Westminster. Don't come for me. I'm just saying personal experience, but yeah, there was definitely an element of I used to call some of the tutors studios mini-me's. So if you followed their ideologies, you'd get the good grades.
Themselves after them, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like literally sometimes you'd go to a studio and you were like, wow, this is the same project like 40 times, and there was no kind of personality. Whereas actually Manchester School of Architecture, it was the opposite, where every studio
individuality and having your own style, your own motivations, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was a tutor at the time, Dr. Nick Dunn, and I was lucky to have him, and he used the analogy that teaching, in his opinion, a good teacher was like a shepherd, as in you've got your flock, and he would let the flock roam. But he said
they let you graze and find your own patch of grass. Don't just say this is the only patch you can eat from. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would let it go, but occasionally if you get too close to the electric fence, I'll pull you back just before you die. But if
you're going way off track. I mean, they do need to do that. They do need to say, okay, this idea is just genuinely probably not a good idea, like to follow, because I mean, my final master's piece I did a massive brutalist concrete thing. We're replacing a shopping center with apartment buildings, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have some fun with this and just turn it into this brutalist nightmare, just to parody the shopping center as the site, because it was such a brutalist piece on the site to begin with. And one of the tutors is like, no one's gonna live there, and I'm like, but it's not a real project. Like, I want to design something that's more of a discourse than I guess I'm going to go and build this tomorrow. So it was more. And then one of the lecturers just suddenly realized what I was doing, and he's like, do it. And he just pushed me all the way through. And at the end, everyone had to do physical models, and he's like, just give me your 3ds Max model. I just want this thing digitally so I can fly around it with my headset on. And it was a completely different experience. So sometimes you find those people that just push you down that path to see how crazy the idea becomes, and it's good to follow those paths. Yeah. And same with BIM too. Sometimes people need to go down some rabbit hole that no one understands before you go down it, and you're like, oh, trust me, I'll come back out and it'll be great. There'll be all this stuff at the end. And when you write a script or a code, it's the same thing. You start with the idea and you don't know how you're going to get there, but you sort of just give people the confidence to let you go down there. Yeah.
I think it's definitely interesting that there's a lot of nuggets here, but what I find really interesting is that, let's pretend now, so outside of me and you, if someone's hypothetically got their eye on BIM right now, I think, would you say it's fair to say, keep that in mind, but work in the industry just to kind of get the understanding of how an architectural practice or design. But then the other thing I was going to ask you, because you've got 1 or 2 points here, we covered skills graduates need, so the soft skills and dealing with people and getting that industry experience. But if you were maybe a graduate that wants to be clued up, is there any tips or programs you would learn or places that you would go to right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the major platform, at least here, and I know in the UK, is probably Revit. I mean, it's a program everyone seems to love to hate at the moment, but it's still
That's true. Everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, what else are we going to use, right? There's other programs like ArchiCAD, Allplan, alternatives, but you really do need your design studio to use the program to really get the most value out of it. Whereas I find Revit, there's so much educational material out there that you almost can't fail in learning Revit. It's just a matter of time and perseverance. I find that probably a lot of side programs from there, like the visual coding programs like Grasshopper and Dynamo, they're a really good entry or gateway into programming itself, which is going to be more and more relevant by the day to our industry. There's more software developers entering our industry now from outside and also from within. I'm sort of half-half. I do a bit of programming, but I also don't want to get too deep into the code because you can get quite lost in it. So I think it's really important to at least have a basic interest in programming, even if you don't use it, just how someone else will use it that you work with. So you can talk to them in programming terms, because there's nothing worse than a programmer that thinks no one understands what they're doing. They tend to become quite disgruntled and give bad results. As well as that, I think a lot of the visualization programs you were talking about, like your Twinmotion, Zenscapes, Lumions, the rendering programs that don't need someone to work on it for 3 weeks just to get a hero shot. They're becoming really relevant, especially for designers to communicate their designs in 3D
So
to their
quick.
clients, but also internally. It's just such an essential tool. Like I use Enscape myself personally, just because I'm quite a strong Revit user. But if you're not, then like Twinmotion might be better, for example, because it comes with a lot of pre-built assets that you don't need to have like a Revit family for, and it's a lot easier to just slap materials on things and build a scene. So I think at least one of those should be like your home base for visualization.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And if you're an engineer, I'd say like Navisworks is probably really important to learn so you can coordinate with other disciplines in a more efficient manner. Most people we don't really coordinate visually that often now, so you won't just fly around a 30-story building and go every story and have a look at each floor. It's more about finding those clash detection routines that can say, just tell me every problem on those 30 floors and I'll fly through one of them just to look at all the typical challenges. So they're probably the main like software platforms that I encourage. Outside of that, there's a lot of open software emerging right now. So like Blender, for example, is building a really strong community at the moment from a visualization aspect. But there's also some guys over at what they call OS Arch, or open source architecture. So if you're interested in pure development and open source development, that's probably something that's going to grow this year and continue to grow as more people come to it. There's one guy I know called Dion Malt, who's trying to build essentially BIM inside Blender itself by putting like the IFC data schema in there. So that's pretty important. I think down the line that's going to at least inspire the next big platform in BIM, I would say. And there's a lot of stealth startups as well, some that I know of quite deeply but can't say a lot about them because of NDAs and all that. But so there's a few interesting things. I don't know if there's a Revit killer yet. Everyone's always looking for the Revit killer. But there's definitely some competitive platforms that will have the benefit of hindsight in how they're set up. So the other programs sort of had to develop as they went. These ones are pretty much developing on the back of every other program's lessons. So I think they're the main platforms I'd focus on. And obviously like Adobe Creative Suite or freemium versions of those programs. Like I use an online web version of Photoshop now that's free called Photopea. And it's like, I don't know how it's legal, but apparently it is. Apparently they must have lost a patent or something like that. So I use that instead now. But just having the ability to creatively manipulate images and designs and objects is probably quite necessary as well, so that you're not one of those Revit users that says, well, Revit can't do it, so I can't do it. It's more about interoperating and lots of programs essentially, but they're the core programs that I guess I focused on and found that they gave me the most value through my 10 years or so far. But there's a lot of programs still coming and developing that'll probably come and sweep a lot of those under the rug one day. So yeah.
I'll tell you what will make you laugh, right? So I did one video on Christmas, and bear in mind, I talk about software from the employability point of view. And what I like what you said there, and it's true, is that you can have an opinion on how ArchiCAD is better than Revit and how all this stuff. But so I released a video, and in the YouTube world, it's like the comments are brutal. So I came out and I said, software you need to learn in 2021. And I was like,
I saw that video.
Yeah, and I was like, it was far from perfect, but what it's like on YouTube. You got to keep developing and sound level, this and that. But anyways, I said you've got to learn Revit, even then I had one guy. He's like, this video is sponsored by Autodesk. ArchiCAD's so much better, and I just felt like saying, okay, that might be true. You might have a much more better understanding of the two softwares than me, but in the UK, everyone uses Revit. So if you want to statistically improve your chances of getting a job in industry, knowing Revit, whether or not it's the most efficient piece of software, is the way to.
Pace. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the country too. I know in Scandinavia, for example, Revit's not as relevant.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of context depending on where you want to work as well. One person I met once, they could not stand Revit at all, detested it, and they couldn't find a company that used it. And I just found two other people like them and said, go and make a little firm and do ArchiCAD. Like, don't let yourself be limited by what everyone else is doing. Limit yourself by your own passion and creativity. And they ended up just doing a tiny little startup firm, and now they're putting little jobs out there, and I was like, take something negative and put it into something positive. So, because there is a lot of, Revit sucks, hasn't changed for 5 years. There's a lot of negative sentiment, but a lot of people are still using it to do work out there and, building buildings on this platform. So it's not all bad, obviously. I do have to sort of stand on the fence with this one, just because on YouTube as, the BIM guru, I can't just be the Aussie Revit guru. I do have to sort of keep a more open mind, but I don't think it's a bad platform by any means. I think it's done some amazing things for our industry, and it invented a lot of systems too that have influenced other programs as well. In that a lot of platforms borrow ideas from each other and pass things around, and there's a lot of programs that say they're inspired by something just so they don't get sued, but you can see it and go, yeah, you've basically copied that. So it's good to see the impact that program's had on the industry, even if it's not the one that we use in 20 years. Like it's left a legacy of some sort behind for all of us to sort of better understand BIM and how building information models function. So yeah, it's definitely relevant. I mean, you have to be aware of the program at the very least, because you'll be coordinating with people that use Revit, even if your firm doesn't. So there's definitely that need to be aware of it. But it's more about what people want to do and where they want to work. I always tell people to pick 3 or 4 firms that they want to work at, and just make that their target. Even if they don't start there, they're hounding until they get to one of those firms, and you learn what programs they use. Ideally, if they all use the same programs, it's better, but if they don't, they don't. And that's how you sort of motivate yourself to learn a platform, because you have like a purpose. Eventually, it's not just learning Revit. So Revit, it's learning it. So you can go BIM manager, Norman Foster, or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Building that goal.
I think it's definitely an interesting point. The other one I get, which I'm sure you'll enjoy here, is that I get occasionally 1 or 2, and I kind of get it. My opinion's changed over the years. So what I'm going to talk about is when I say, so in recruitment, knowing Revit is borderline a prerequisite now, at least on the roles I work on, because we're talking IT. Yeah, and so I'll get someone and they'll be like, oh, it's a Revit role. And they go, well, do you know what? I don't think you need Revit. We've got CAD. I can do a brilliant detail in CAD. And I think it's gone past the point now where my response before would be to talk about the advantages of BIM. But now I say, do you know what? If you don't want to learn it, don't learn it. You're going to get left behind.
They're a bad hire. They're going to be a problem the moment they start, because they'll be trying to turn the entire office around just on their system. And it's like, no, it'll be like a BIM manager coming in and saying, oh, you've got standards, but I've got my own little thing. And this is what we're doing now. And the amount of BIM managers that still do that, they try to come and, turn the ship around on their own. And suddenly everyone's just going, oh, where are we going? This is crazy. I've seen so many small companies have that. Like, even as a consultant, some of my clients have had to come in and essentially just turn the ship back around and say, you guys were like going here and then you did this, what happened? And they're like, oh, we hired this guy or this girl and they did all this crazy stuff. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, this is garbage. They've just completely ignored what you needed. And you almost have to go back a year and say, okay, where were you? Let's just get you back on that track and keep going. And then immediately they're like, oh yeah, I remember that system. Good, let's keep going. So, and same thing, if they don't want to meet the criteria of the role, then yeah, it's a big risk, I guess, for the people. And also for them, I don't really understand the mentality of like going against what people actually need rather than just imposing what you want. And then like, it's like, why are you even applying for the role if the criteria don't meet what you need? It's like, be selective. Don't just like apply to every and any role. I mean, I know that it's hard times and people are looking for work, but I think it pays to be, at least diligent in what you apply to as well, so that it's a job that you're going to actually want to stay at as well, because otherwise you just bounce between job to job to job. And even I did that for a bit too, because I was figuring myself out. But I see a lot of people with the 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and it doesn't look good on a CV.
No,
so you can get that you actually want to do.
Yeah, you can get. Normally, if someone keeps moving around, there's a reason.
Fine, yeah.
And if you embrace it and you just go like the way you did and go, look, I was finding myself. I wasn't quite happy with where I was going or where I was, then I think that makes sense. But the one bit I do say, and one bit I will confess, is that, so if you knew me in university, right, I was the guy who would definitely, I've got to phrase this in a way which I can still put on the podcast. So I was definitely not the guy in the studio who had the Adobe license with a crack. I was definitely not that guy. And I definitely wasn't the guy who would have MicroStation because remember back then there was no we were in an era though, guys, when there was no Adobe student licenses cheap, and there was no Adobe Autodesk version, and you had to know someone or download it on a dodgy site, and I'd have like an old version of the software because it was the only one that could be cracked. Hypothetically.
When you say you, we're not talking about us. We're talking about them, the other people.
Okay, it might have been hard times, but so I was that guy at the cutting edge, always the tech, and like you were saying, is that I think I took pride in being at the cutting edge, but now what I'm actually is in because part of the Architecture Social is, and you kindly talked about the website. I kind of have the same attitude of, okay, I'm not a web designer, but I need to learn it enough that I understand it. I can do it myself because I'm not in a position to hire someone to do the website. And also, there's some really good skills that you learn in it because now I can do it and I can do the graphic design. I can do it all myself, which is really powerful. But once I get to the point that I've achieved the goal, I'm not interested anymore. Whereas 18-year-old Steve,
a point where you need the skills. I had the same thing in programming. A lot of people say, "Oh, it doesn't look like you're doing C#, which is like the next step after Dynamo." And I'm like, no, because there's like hundreds of other developers out there doing it as well. And I found what I need, and I found what it works for me, and I found out that there's still, thousands of people that don't know it or are learning it. And I'm like, I'd rather stay here and keep funneling these people through to get them all up to the same level. And it's like you find that point where you're like, this will do. Like, this is what I need, and either what I need to make an income or what I need to be satisfied with what I've done. Like you said, you built your graphics and your website. Obviously, you can pay some person on Fiverr to go and do the graphics, but they're not your graphics, and you didn't have their own personal connection with what you've done. So, and I have the same thing on my website. I built a lot of the graphics on it and the parts. I used Wix, so I still did a lot of click and drag, but a lot of the graphics and logos and things like that I made myself, and I can look at it and be proud of it for something that I learned bits and pieces through as well. So I think it's really valuable to do that, especially in a business, because that's your identity. Like even like I'm wearing like the Aussie BIM Guru shirt, so like you sort of carry that brand with you, and it becomes something that you can really personally speak and relate to, and the clients can see that, and it all connects. Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm going to hijack the BIM track for 1 second. So I've got something I think you will be proud of, right? So I set up on the Architecture Social the marketplace, okay? And so I've got, in the next day or two, I'm going to be having like an image up on there, but I've got an idea for which we're going to roll out. So if you go on to there now, so the background of the landing page of the Architecture Social, you can buy the artwork of that.
Oh, cool.
So what
I found a really good little website called Redbubble where you can make your own graphics and sell them essentially as well. That's what I've been using for my shirt printing. So
no, don't go to Redbubble, because I was going to say we're going to do it on the social, Gavin. We're going to do it. So
no, that's like for a really basic version. I think if you can own the marketplace, it's better. Like I sell my own content on my website, so this is sweet. Yeah, you've changed the graphics since I last saw it. Awesome.
Yeah, do you know what?
Now it's really cool. I like it.
So what do you think about this? Right. So now I've got everywhere like t-shirts, and because I went crazy in the weekend.
Yeah.
But basically, so the artwork section, what I've got now is, so every month we're going to have a student. It's going to be an open competition. Now I've got to actually do it because I'm announcing it officially through here. Oh no, Garrett, this is going to. I have to trim this bit out at the end if it goes wrong. No, we'll keep it in. But basically, every month we're going to have a competition. The best piece of artwork then goes on a picture on the wall. People can buy the artwork. It's going to have a QR code on it, which you scan and it'll go to the student's portfolio, right? And I'm going to give away a fee for every sale after tax, after profit, because you understand that as a business owner. I can't say the whole thing. Otherwise I'll get... But then I'm thinking between 10 to 20% we'll give back to the student for every painting that gets sold.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that.
Are you in?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I can see one of my courses is on here too, the Performance Network Rhino Inside course.
Oh yeah, that links to Performance Network.
Yeah. No, cool.
Are you on there?
Yeah, that's my course. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to. Well, now we're officially mates online, so I'll star that and I'll boost you up in the store.
No, it's very cool. It's good. A lot of things here too, like event listings. This is great. This is very exciting. Yeah, I look forward to seeing this part grow. This is a great idea. I like this. Yeah, it beats Redbubble.
Okay, yes. This is me on the weekend because sometimes I'm a bit of a bit of a no-lifer, and I just was doing on the weekend.
That's okay. I locked myself in my room for about a year just to learn Revit, so I've definitely been one with the no life. Yeah.
You let me off, but it's the perfect time to do all.
I was going to say I still play Magic the Gathering too, so don't worry. My life is still like a bit of a no life sometimes.
Do you know what? Oh, this would be interesting. Have you seen the Dungeons and Dragons group on the Architecture Social we're doing?
No, there's one on there.
Yeah,
awesome.
so we got to go. It's called Dungeons, Architects and Dragons, right? And so
Yeah.
Ben, who's arranging it, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. He's making it so that you have to fill out a form, okay, and then he's going to do it so that he's going to be the game master. I've never done it before, and he's going to be all on Zoom, and he's going to assign us rough characters that we embellish.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So magic.
Fears and traits and things like that. Yeah.
I want to see. Why don't we do it? Right, and
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
be.
just getting into D&D right now. I've got a friend that's trying to invite me into their campaign as well here, so I'm just brushing back up on the rules for version 5.3 or whatever one they're at now. So yeah, that might be something I can find some time for. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to change the name from Dungeons, Architects and Dragons to Dungeon Architects, BIM and Dragons, and that.
I've still got like a tiny bit of architecture in me, just not too much now. Yeah.
Well, we'll do that. But so, all right, I think we're around the hour mark. So what I would say, I think it's been a great chat. Well, maybe what we can do.
Great fun.
Yeah, we can return on a particular topic. So the next one we ever do, we can either it can be either World of Warcraft or we can have like a particular subject. Okay.
Yeah. And we can talk and do something on the side. Yeah.
Maybe as well, what would be really cool, but I'm going really off one, is that we could have someone ask me and you questions, and we can see who knows more World of Warcraft lore.
Oh, you'll beat me hands down. I'm not the red shirt guy, that's for sure.
I know that reference.
Yeah, the red shirt. Yeah.
I don't know. That's pretty up in there, I reckon.
Yeah. For anyone that doesn't know, that hasn't played WoW, it's this guy that basically knows all the lore, and he comes to all the conventions at Blizzard and essentially picks out the smallest details that they get wrong between the games, and they go and fix them for him in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing it back in 2004. But I do think that
got more history with it than me. I started playing it when I became single, so that was probably I had a good bachelor period where I got on the WoW when I finally had time for it.
Okay, World of Warcraft is not going to help the bachelor period. It's going to extend the period. You know what I'm saying?
It accentuated it. Yeah. Well, once my partner showed up, I said I better stop playing WoW now. That was I think 2012 through to 2015. So I got about 3 years in there. Yeah, but I didn't get to play the classic days when it was like in its heyday. But we could always check out WoW Classic. Maybe I know they've just got that going as well. So
I played a little bit of it, and then I remembered that how brutal it was. Because in the old days you got to level 60, I got to 20, and I was like, oh my god. But then what I remembered is back then I had loads of time on my hands. It's the classic problem I'm sure you have, where it's like I used to hypothetically again maybe use BitTorrent and stuff to download films, and now I have money, I can buy stuff, and I buy everything.
I mean, we live in an age where information is just so readily available, and products are so readily accessible as well. It's crazy. I even have to just think about the days of dial-up internet and how much things have changed, and it's hard to even explain it to generations now that haven't experienced it at all. All they've known is the internet. It's a strange sort of meeting point of the difficulty of actually accessing things. Like I think we appreciate it more, and we're better at troubleshooting problems because we had to be the guy like toggling the switches on the modems and trying to figure out what's going on. And you couldn't just go on your mobile and do like a little FAQ while you're trying to connect your computer to the internet with mobile data. You had to genuinely just guess your way through it.
Where if someone picked up the phone, it would cut off the dial-up. I remember like, Mum!
Oh gosh, yeah.
Do you remember? And she's like, I want to call your auntie in half an hour. You better be off. And I'm like, I can't because I downloaded like the album of Nickelback, which was like 3 megabytes.
Like that,
from LimeWire, and then halfway through the song, it would just go like, and then you're like,
re-establish the connection. Oh man, yeah, times have changed. Yeah, and even in BIM and all these other things, like there's just so much more training data out there, and you don't have to guess your way through the programs anymore. It's changing a lot. So. Yeah, well, I'm glad it has. Like, I wouldn't want everyone to go through what we went through, but
well, I like it's like the best of times, the worst of times.
Oh
Do you know what I mean? It's like
it was good times, the blurst of times, but we had some good times in the 90s. Yeah,
I think so. And last thing before we go, just so we got to add are you on Steam? I've got a Steam
I
account.
think I am. Yeah, I'd have to go and check my ID because I don't use it too frequently. I'm mostly a PlayStation player these days.
Oh, you were on the PSN, right? Okay,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
My handle's I've got the handle if you want it, and if anyone else wants it.
You're gonna publicly put your handle on the podcast.
Yeah, it's called Lord of Riots 88. So
All
for
right,
anyone that plays Magic the Gathering might know the reference there, but
right. I'm into the void because I'm
I
also
enjoy it as
cool.
well. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. I've got an embarrassing amount of games on there. You will look at it and
I've
you'll
done the
be.
Steam sales before. Yeah, they build up pretty fast. Yeah.
Oh, all right. How many games do you think I got on there?
I'll just guess you got a few hundred maybe.
3,500.
What?
Yeah,
Man,
I know.
a lot
I'm
of Steam
kind of.
sales.
They like some people use the analogy, and I'm not saying it's true, but it's like having too many shoes in the closet or something like
Yeah.
that. Well, I've got like a billion games on my Steam account. That's how bad. That's how
You got
bad
like
I
50
am.
games. Wow, well, that's amazing. Yeah, okay, no, I definitely bow down my gaming hat to you with that one. That's you win that one. I don't think I even own that many games. Full stop.
It's an embarrassing amount. So and I haven't played all of them, but
There must
so
be some achievement on Steam for doing that that only a few people must have.
yeah, Gabe Newell, the owner of Steam and Valve, is just I put a wing on his house. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm telling you. But I think so. We've covered Steam. We've covered
Yeah,
World of
yeah.
Warcraft. We have covered BIM and stuff as well. So and
It's nice not to always talk about BIM because I do a lot of BIM talks, and it's nice to just connect it all back to the facets of life that aren't just about BIM as well. So, because we're all human at the end of the day, and I don't eat and sleep BIM too often. I like to think
no,
so.
I think it's more about with BIM or whatever you do in life. I think that it's more about like the social is a combination of it's ideas that I've had over the years, and it's I've managed to do that because of my experience getting there and the fact that I worked in industry and the fact that I've done recruitment all helps to get
Yeah, it's
there.
all part of the journey, isn't it? I mean, even my consulting business, there were steps to that I laid in place years before I started doing it. Like my YouTube was sort of part of an idea of being someone, so I could actually have my business and be known as someone. So there's all little stepping stones along the way, and that's always
Yeah.
advice I give people as well when they're looking to be consultants or doing something more abstract. Is like you need to have that pathway mapped out to some degree, even if it's an abstract pathway. It's not just I open a business tomorrow and the clients show up. It's a much more calculated pathway so that when you're on there you can keep guiding yourself through it to the next step of the way, and it's really important. Like with your social platform, I'm sure there's still steps that we haven't heard about that you're planning, and it's all coming
Gonna,
together and
I
sort of
need I
building
need to
up.
get a Gavin Crump special artwork with where the QR code goes. All
Oh yeah,
right.
I'm happy to contribute a couple. Yeah,
Yeah, we need
I've got
that.
a, I've got a good one of Australia where it's got all the program logos built up, all the states of Australia, so that could be a fun little graphic.
Let's do it, and we can haggle on the split of the commit on the things, huh?
Yeah, no, it sounds fun. It sounds fun. Yeah, I've got to get on there more often. I use LinkedIn a little bit these days, but I am trying to find some new platforms just that are a little bit more focal and to the point, because I find that LinkedIn's becoming a bit of a Facebook. So
Yeah.
maybe social could be the next LinkedIn for me.
Hey, that would be cool, isn't it? And I've already got the Dungeons and Dragons, so
You're already enticing me in. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I know how to get you because it's a passion for gaming. So we'll ignore the architecture and the BIM. We'll just go.
Yeah. For
We'll
me, it'll
go.
just be a matter of time commitment. Once I can sort that out, I'll be there for sure.
No, you're totally cool. If I think of it like an experiment, we do as much or as little as you want.
Yeah, yeah.
And what was I going to say? The last thing I was going to say, just on the point of, I think the analogy for this and like BIM or anything, you can't just be a BIM person. Or like, for instance, I tell you the other day, someone said to me, Steve, I want to build an architecture community. Can you tell me how to do it? And at first, I don't think this person actually understood the gravity of the question because I was like, A, don't do it because it takes up all my time. But I was like, you can't just want to do a community. And I think it's like BIM or anything. You can't just say, you've got to live it, breathe it. And then it
Wanting
comes.
to do it is the first step, and then everything has to come from there. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like your BIM YouTube channel, which is really helpful, comes from your experiences and where you were. So for anyone listening to me, if you want to build your own social platform or be on YouTube, or you're thinking of becoming a BIM manager, think about more the journey getting there or getting that hands-on experience, and you might find that you end up dumping a BIM manager, you do something else, or you do something else, but you find your own passion, and that kind of search for what's interesting is going to make you more successful because you're going to be doing something you're passionate about. Do you know what I mean?
And have your motivation as well, like have a reason for it. Like mine was actually born out of like frustration at the closed nature of BIM in our industry at the time. So, and for yourself, I'm sure you're trying to make everyone more socially connected and active and collaborative, and that's probably similar motives there as well. So I think that's really important too. Wanting to do it's one thing, but knowing why you want to do it, that's probably the bigger part, because that's what drives you forward to keep doing it as well.
Well, you definitely have passion, and I tell you what, you will definitely be making the people proud that you crashed the BIM model off status. So I
still see them back in Adelaide sometimes for drinks, and they still remind me of it, of course. But
it's going to be brought up every time. He goes, you know, he's got a BIM consultancy now, and he crashed the BIM model, and you're like, but I'm the same. I would just totally bring it up to every.
Yeah, but it's good fun. Like someone told me that they found out that story, and they're like, "Did that really happen?" It's like this guy told me, and I'm like, "I know exactly who told you based on how you told me." I know the guy, so it's good. It's good fun, but that keeps you humble. It reminds you of where you came from, and sort of keeps you on the straight and narrow, so it's important. Yeah.
Everyone makes mistakes, but for anyone listening, they can find you online. You are on the social, but let's talk about where they can find you. Your YouTube channel, LinkedIn.
Yeah, so a few places, I guess. On YouTube, Aussie BIM Guru is the channel name. So that's Aussie with 2 S's, not the Z variant. And I'm also on LinkedIn just as Gavin Crump. I think I'm actually like the Gavin Crump. I was on there quite early, so it's lucky. I had like a dormant LinkedIn for like 10 years and never used it, and then finally came back
yoink.
to it. So I have no numbers after my name, luckily, which is cool. But you can find me for consulting at BIM Guru, so www.bimguru.com.au. So similar to my YouTube channel, but without the Aussie. And in general, you can just contact me through either my email, which is aussiebimguru@gmail.com, just for general queries. If you're having trouble with a program, just let me know. I don't do like freemium work too often. Like I'll help to a point. Like maybe I'll give you like 5 minutes of coding time just to see if it's a really easy solution, I'll show you how to do it.
Tell you, yeah.
If it's like I need you to build a script for me, I'm like, okay, cool. Now we're consulting. There's a fine line, but I try to be available for especially students or graduates that are looking for advice on where to begin. I've got literally one that I'm getting back to after this podcast that just messaged me right before, and I said I'll get back to you like in a few hours with some advice. So if you're struggling or just a bit confused, or you just need like a little bit of a push in the right direction, just let me know. I think I've responded to every LinkedIn message I've ever got, even if it's just telling outsourcers to leave me alone. so there's a lot of ways you can reach me. I'm probably a little bit too accessible. If anything, my phone buzzes all day. But yeah, no, definitely keen to help people out where I can. And I'll do my best too. So don't hesitate to reach out. I don't bite.
It's amazing what you've done. It's so amazing. And
just because I see what you're doing too, and it reminds me of when I was sort of starting off my channel and just getting that momentum, and I can see that it's gonna go a long way at the social. I can see the trajectory for it for sure. Yeah.
Well, you are. Well, I'm a bit torn because I love my lad Tom Mahone, but you know you've got the World of Warcraft, so you're doing well at being like the best BIM friend right now. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Tom's great too. Tom can do a lot of things that I can't do in BIM, and I'm sure I can do a lot of things he can't do in World of Warcraft. So.
You two would be the dream team on it. But hey, and just the last thing before just so you know, on the Architecture Social, I have put you as supported channels. You're a friend of the social.
Thank you.
Just so. Yeah. You might get 1 or 2 subscribers from that, and that's all I'm going to say is you're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, the subscriber count doesn't bother me too much. It's just about sharing and getting the knowledge out there. That's my motivator, and that's what that sort of thing does. That makes people aware of what I do. And for those that are wondering when I'm coming back, I've been on break for about 2 months. I'll be back probably second week of February if anyone's freaking out and waiting for me to let them know. So I'll be back and swinging. So, and a course platform will be coming about a month after that. So busy year ahead. Yeah.
I can't wait to follow it. So thank you so much, Gavin.
Thank you. I've had a great time on here. Really good free flow discussion is really my favorite sort of podcast. So I've had a great time. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I hope that the bloody files are exported all right now. So I'm going to click the button and we'll find out, Gavin. Otherwise, I'm going to literally jump out of the bridge. See you in a bit.
Cool.
Okay.